We're really excited about the program today. Just this week, things weren't happy in the land of happy. I think you saw that at Disney. So it's clearly a hot topic in terms of CEO succession and the NextGen CEO. We really want this program to be interactive because that's where the magic happens here. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speakers today, Evelyn Dilsaver, and our guest speaker, Labe Jackson, Laban, known by Labe Jackson. Our moderator is Evelyn Dilsaver. Evelyn's had a successful career in financial services, including as the CEO of a large investment management firm before becoming a corporate director. She's on the board of several public companies, as you can see here, across multiple industries, including Aeropostale, Health Equity, and Tempur Sealy, and she's on the board of Blue Shield. In addition to her involvement in other not-for-profit organizations, she's also a director of the NACD, Northern California chapter. In her spare time, which you could tell from her slate, she doesn't have much, but she's very involved with the Commonwealth Club. For those of you who don't know the Commonwealth Club of San Francisco, it's the country's oldest and largest public affairs forum, and she's extremely active in terms of that organization. It's taken her to all parts of the globe. I was fascinated at dinner last night talking to her about all the places she's been in far reaches such as the Baltic states, a number of parts of Asia, and recently Cuba, which she counts amongst her top picks for travel. So certainly all of us want to get there. Our guest speaker today is Labe Jackson. Labe is the chairman and CEO of Clear Creek Properties, a real estate development company. His full-time job is a director and audit committee chair of J.P. Morgan Chase and J.P. Morgan Securities PLC. For all you audit committee folks out there, of which I'm one, he's a member of the Audit Committee Leadership Network, a group of audit committee chairs from some of North America's leading companies committed to improving the performance of audit committees and strengthening trust in financial markets. Labe has, as you can imagine, many stories to tell about his tenure as a director at J.P. Morgan Chase, including being on the proverbial hot seat during the London whale crisis. A little-known fact about Labe is that he does chew ice, right, Labe? But also he is a director, past director of many companies. One university he is formerly a director of that you don't hear of often, but is the oldest university west of the Alleghenies is Transylvania University. So, and he is also a graduate of West Point. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome both to the chairs here. I think you'll find both are extremely knowledgeable on the subject, and we look forward to hearing.
Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for waking up so early in the morning to be with us. We're really excited to be here. Actually, we just discovered that both of us flew in from California to come here, and we're really enjoying this weather. I walked around last night, and it wasn't humid, so I was really excited. Actually, there aren't too many people that walk around here, I just noticed. So I was the only one on the road walking. Anyway, this is a fascinating topic, and as Barbara mentioned, most of you may have read the article about Disney the other day where they actually had a good CEO succession plan, but the CEO in transition left the firm. So now they're in a quandary to figure out what do you do next. And I think that's the issue for a lot of boards is even though you do all your planning, you never know what might happen. And in this particular case, just based on the article, because I don't know, it was indicated that he left because he heard that the board and Iger were looking at other candidates besides himself. So they were now having a horse race instead of one individual being named. And I think that's a big issue for boards when you think about succession planning. Do you have a horse race, and what does that do to the individuals that are in that horse race? But just a few statistics before we get started, and I'll ask Labe some questions. You got some brochures when you first came in, and so a lot of this information is in there. You don't have to take notes. But the tenure of CEOs, for example, has gone from 11.4 years to 8.8, and that's a time frame of 1995 to 2004, and that's for North America. Globally, it's gone from a little under 9 years to about 6 years. So tenure has really, really dropped. Booz did a study in 2003 that said 55% of outstanding CEOs, of outside CEOs depart due to forced resignations versus 34% of insiders. And Heidrick estimates that that's now up to 40% of outside CEOs last about 18 months. So why is that? Some of the reasons, one, I think, are the activists, which are really pushing performance. So many companies today, I think, are given such a short time frame. Not all companies are going to do well, but when you fall, you have such a short time frame to bring it back up. And I could speak about that later because I'm on the board of Tempur Sealy, and that's what happened to us last year with the proxy fight. And then the other one that's causing the tenure to drop is the increase of outside CEOs. And the final one is, again, in the handouts that you had, there was a study that outside CEOs are 7 times more likely to be dismissed with a short tenure and than inside CEOs. And a lot of that, again, is because there's asymmetrical information. In other words, the candidate knows best their qualities, but boards, more often than not, choose wrong. And they end up choosing a candidate who doesn't work out. I'd love to know also, before we get into this, how many of you are on non-for-profit or family business companies? Raise your hands. Okay, so you guys even know, even more. It's really tough if you've got a very charismatic executive director, president of a family-owned business or a non-for-profit, because more often than not, they really don't want a succession plan. And in a non-for-profit, Labe and I were talking about this, in a non-for-profit, you end up with a executive director who's very charismatic. The person following behind usually fails because everybody compares that second CEO to the first one, and they always pale by comparison. So if there was a way to skip that second one and go on to the third, that would be great. So let's talk a little bit. As you all know, Labe is with JP Morgan as a director. Has been there how long? Labe, have you been as director?
Since 93.
Since 93. Tremendous experience.
I started at Bank One.
With Bank One. All right. So I would love to hear your thoughts about succession planning at JP Morgan, just because Jamie Dimon is such a unique, charismatic individual. How do you guys think about that?
Well, we hired Jamie at Bank One. He was 43 years old. Bank One had merged with First Chicago, and we got the name and they got the city. So we moved to Chicago. True story. That's how silly it was. But anyway, they wanted to be in Chicago, so we got the name and they got the city. Our CEO at Bank One was running the business, and the credit card business at Bank One blew up. It's a long answer, but I got to get to that answer. So our CEO had to retire. Now, when we did this merger, it was the dumbest thing. It was the dumbest merger that's ever been done, probably, because we had 11 directors and they had 11 directors. So there were 22 directors on this board, which made no sense, totally ungovernable, and we hated each other. In the boardroom. Outside the boardroom, we were fine, but in the boardroom, we didn't like each other. When our CEO left, the First Chicago people wanted their person that they had known because they were comfortable with him. The problem was he was incompetent. And the Bank One people didn't think that we should have an incompetent person running Bank One. So there was a war, literally a war. And finally, the First Chicago people said, okay, why don't we have 2 people from Bank One and 2 people from First Chicago start a search committee? Great original idea, fabulous idea, you think? That's after 6 months. And so the head of the search committee was a Bank One guy. And they went through a search. They picked Andrea Redmond, and she brought Jamie, and she brought 4 other people. One of them was from Texas. And so here was Jamie's, here was what Jamie, he was 43 years old. He was unemployed. And he was from New York. That is 3 of the worst possible things you can do in Chicago. And so anyway, we hired him. That was a war too. But once you met him, and he showed you what his plan was, it was no contest. I mean, it was so obvious. And he'd gotten fired for all the wrong reasons. Sandy Weil fired him at Citicorp because Jamie wouldn't promote Sandy Weil's daughter. So that's a whole nother story. But anyway, so now let's get into the succession. Now now it's 1999. You've got a 43-year-old brand new CEO talking to a 43-year-old brand new CEO about succession. Is like talking to that wall, because he's going to live forever.
Right.
So we talked to him, and he shook his head, and we went through all that business. So, the first after 3 months he came in, he said, "I'm going to cut the board in half." I said, "Well, this is a strong sucker." I said, "He's going to fire half his bosses," which he did.
Wow.
And So now we go through 2004. We merged with J.P. Morgan. Now he's 48, and that had its own problems. Yeah. J.P. Morgan, talking to a 48-year-old about succession, it's like talking to that wall. Okay, so we're not making
change in 5 years. In other words, right?
No, hell, he's going to live forever, and so. So we're not doing a very good job as directors of getting this done. Then, and by this time, when he came in the first day, when he was 43, into into the board of Bank One, he said, "I'm going to buy 2 million." He said, "I should eat what I cook, so I'm going to buy 2 million shares at the market, restricted for 6 months, which was $56 million worth of stock." Now that got my attention. So and then he got stock along. So now, in 2004, we merged with J.P. Morgan. He's 48, and we're talking about succession, no good. Then we go through the mess. Now he's got, at that time, 5 million shares. And now he's 54. Talking to about 54-year-old with 80% of his net worth in a company, going through a gigantic mess, now you got his attention. And so now the great thing about Jamie Dimon is once he takes a hold of something, you can back off, because he's going to run over you. And so we get every dinner, we have 8 board meetings a year in person, and then we have a bunch of other meetings. We always have a dinner, and we always have people that could be success. And then I go around the world every year by myself for a month to 6 weeks, and I meet a lot of people too. So here's the answer. When regulators ask us that very question, it's a long damn getting here, but I'm telling you, I say, look, first you got to tell me, because then he got cancer last year, and he's through that, and that's fine, and he's healthy, and he goes to Sloan Kettering every, now it's 4 months. He's fine. But he knows, he's not going to live forever now. So he's really interested in this. So the question is, when's he going to go? So we have what we call the bus plan. If a bus hits him, we know exactly what we're going to do the next day, which we should, which is only the board knows, because that would be a problem if that gets out. And he knows what it is. And we would wait we figured we'd have to wait about 4 weeks. Because if he got hit by a bus, the markets would go down. I mean, I hate to make him up into something, but it was just the truth. The markets would go down. J.P. Morgan would be in shock.
That's right.
And we would be in shock. So we were going to let it go for a little bit, not very long, and then we know what we do. If it's 5 years, I don't have a clue. Because now those ages, 5 years from now, those ages, now you're in your mid-50s. I'm not sure somebody in their mid-50s
Is going to want to take.
Yeah, and if it's 8 years, which I hope it is, I probably haven't even met the person, and I'll be gone. I'll be long gone off the board. So that's the answer. You got to get the CEO engaged, and they've got to believe it, and it's got to be important to them. It's got to be, and if the next CEO of J.P. Morgan is not successful, I'm a failure. I failed.
But it sounds like you're thinking internal candidates. You're not thinking external candidates.
We got 270,000 people.
Yeah.
I think we could probably find somebody that can.
You
do
hope
that.
so.
Yeah.
You hope so.
Yeah. I mean, we got a lot of people, and we got a lot of talent.
That's
A
great.
lot of talent.
That's great.
And there was an article written 2 years ago with 12 people across the front business page of the New York Times. 12 people that had left. And people asked me about that, losing all that talent. I said, well, we lost 12. We got 269,000, and we got some left. But not one of those people could have been CEO of that company. Not one. Not one. Now, one of them is the CEO of Barclays. One of them is CEO of Standard Chartered. One of them is CEO of, he left long before, of AIG. One of them is CEO of PNC.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, so we got them all over the place. But none of them could have been CEO. None of them could have replaced Jamie. So,
Yeah, that's really hard. In fact, I had one board where we were grooming an individual to be the CEO, and she decided she didn't want to wait that long because the CEO was relatively young, really good, and we weren't about ready to let him go to bring in this woman, internal candidate on up. So she ended up leaving. And she just took on a CEO role.
It's okay.
And it's okay.
It's fine.
That's what we told them. But having said that, now we're stuck because as a board, we only had that one individual. So now we have to start the grooming process again, and it's going to take a while. And I did have one. I had one where the CEO kept telling me, I'm going to retire in 2 years. And that 2 years kept getting stretched out.
Yep.
So when you do that, again, one of the handouts is what could go wrong. And a lot of it has to do with the CEO, as you said. If they're not ready, there's nothing you can do as a board, I think, to really push that issue as much as you want to.
Yeah. The CEO has to buy in on this thing.
Right.
It's got to be important to them, and you have to talk to them about. You don't want this company to fail.
Yeah.
You don't want to be the person, because everybody is going to think you picked this person. So you don't want that person to fail. I mean, there's a lot of conversation about this, and most CEOs are grown-ups, and they want to succeed after they're gone. They don't want it to see the thing go bad. So you just have to, it's like anything else, you got to have a conversation.
Now, you mentioned something, Jamie had cancer. That brings to mind the United CEO. Remember, he was just promoted into that role, and then he had the heart attack, and they were left bereft for, 6 months? He just came back. And coming back, he walked into a shareholder activism issue. So could you talk a little bit about, could you talk a little bit about what happens in that process when somebody like the CEO gets sick, and then how does the board handle that issue?
Okay.
From a healthcare point of view, right?
Yeah, the first, of course, I love to kid Jamie because not many people kid him. When it was announced, the stock went down $4 billion in value. So I said, well, at least we know what you're worth to the company. And then when it was announced he was well, it went up $7 billion. Now it's a $280 billion. I mean, it's, So the first thing he did was handle it perfectly. He called the lead director, and he called me, and he called the head of governance. He said, I got cancer, and I'm going to Sloan Kettering, and we're going to announce it in the morning. So it was, I mean, literally, they called us after 4 o'clock, after the market closed, they announced it wouldn't amount market, which was the perfect way. Do not fool around with all that stuff. Just be straightforward. And he went Sloan Kettering. He took naps. He did what he was supposed to do. It was interesting. This happened in June. And life is, as we talked earlier, life is interesting. It happened in June. In July, we have an offsite. Not the board, and we don't go. But his main people have an offsite. And there's about 20 of them, maybe 30. And so he didn't go to the offsite, first one he didn't go to. And he came back, and so I called the chief legal officer, who was a grown-up, and I spent a lot of time talking to because we get sued every day. But I said, how did it go? He said, you know, it was fascinating. Nobody tried to take over the thing. We all just went in there, did our jobs, did what we were supposed to do. He said it was wonderful. And then Jamie had heard that and came to the board and told the board that. So that shows you, and right now he's got the best bunch of people working for him he's ever had. It's not even close. And that it showed up in that. So because of his leadership and because of the way he'd set the thing up, it worked fine. Now, I think if he'd have been gone 2 or 3 years, it would have changed. But he wasn't. He was gone 9 months.
That's great. And so you used your emergency plan in that case for Jamie. That's great. You know, you said you also travel the world. So since our title is around finding the next generation CEO, could you talk about what do you do in those travels and the people that you meet and what you're looking for?
Well, when I was on the board of Bank One was, I mean, it was a big $450 billion business, but it was simple. We had branches, we had a commercial bank, and we had a credit card business. And so we merged with JP Morgan. And it was a multiple of 50 complicated. And plus we were worldwide. And I was chairman of the audit committee, and I understood risk. And I said, this is not good for me because I don't know what's going on here. So about 10 years ago, I decided to go around the world to our big offices because I wanted to meet the people who sent me all these internal audit stuff that I wanted to see if they had a brain in their head because, you know, people do great pieces of paper that don't have a brain in their head. And so I wanted to see if they had any sense. I wanted to meet my internal audit staff and tell them how much I appreciated them. I wanted to meet our compliance people. I wanted to meet the regulators because the regulators are very important. And I wanted to meet our managers, and I wanted to see who was coming up and who, and so I've done that every year for 10 years, and now I know everybody. Not everybody, but I mean I know all the people I need to know, but I know the regulators now, and we have 180 regulators.
Wow.
Yeah.
Around the world. Wow.
180 of them, and they're every one of them get up every morning. And they say, we want this and we want it in an hour. And as I explained to them, we have a business to run. If you don't mind, give us 2 hours or give us some time. But it's too bad. I was in Singapore, and all you business people will appreciate this, especially the people that are in the finance business. The best regulators in the world are in Singapore. Why are they the best regulators in the world? Because they get paid the same as the bankers. So they get real talent. They get real talent in there. And it's a small country, and they can't make a mistake because it's a small country. And they got big countries that are very, you know, anyway. So they have to really know what's going on in Asia. And it's fascinating to sit down and talk to them. I sit down for a couple hours. So when I went in this time, I asked the head of it's called MAS, something, AMAS, so it's something of Singapore. And I said, when are we going to tell the world that the emperor has no clothes? And he says, what do you mean? I said, well, think about it. You're a regulator and you work with a central bank. So you go around squeezing us and making us have more capital, more liquidity. That's fine. But we can't lend as much. We can't take as much risk because of all these ratios you make us have. So because we can't take as much risk, there's not as much growth. So the central bank who you work for now going to negative rates to get growth.
Right.
I said, the emperor has no clothes here. And he apologized to me. He said, I'm really sorry. I said, why are you sorry? He said, well, we're a small country. We don't have as much power at Basel, which is where they come up with a lot of these rules in Switzerland. And he said, we just don't have as much power, but we are slow rolling this thing. I hope none of you all know him. Don't tell him I told you the story. But anyway, he said, we're slow rolling because it isn't working. And you can look at Europe, it isn't working. It ain't working here either.
No, it's not working.
It's not working.
That's right. That's right. Okay. So as you go around, I take it you don't do this with management. So you're
by
traveling
myself.
By yourself. So can
I tell the directors
Sure.
in this room something? And you should be, when Jamie asked me to be the head of the audit committee, I said, I only got one rule. I said, I can talk to anybody in the company anytime. He said, I don't care who you talk to. And he means that. If you have a CEO that is worried about you as a director, by the way, he works for you, you don't work for him, talking to anybody in the company, you got the wrong CEO. You got the wrong CEO. You don't even have to question whether it doesn't make no sense. So remember that, because you got a problem. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry.
So as you're meeting these folks, are you seeing anybody coming up that might be a good CEO through the finance side of the world? Or?
Two of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay.
Two of them could run the place.
Good.
Yeah.
That's great.
It's really good.
That is great. And so are you also meeting operating folks beyond the finance folks?
Oh, sure.
You are? Okay, good.
And I spend about 3 days, and we start at 8 in the morning, we go to 5. And about every 45 minutes I have a new group. But the best, I started 5 years ago, and this is something you can do in your companies because it's really neat. I said, I want to meet the young people. I want to meet the people 28 years old to 32 years old because they're going to run the business long after I'm dead. But I'd like to hear from them. So we get in the room. Now, these kids have no idea what they're asking you. They just ask you these questions and you say, I better check on that. That's pretty good. Because they see something that doesn't make any sense to them, and so they ask you, and I don't have an answer. But you go study that a little bit, and it's usually a problem. So I just love meeting with them. They're a ball.
Well, first of all, you have to explain what a board of director is to many of them because they don't really know.
Well, it's all been explained to them by the time I get there. Yeah.
Right.
How very important I am. Yes.
Yes, of course. Half the time I find they accredit you with a lot of decisions that, of course, you don't make. You don't make those decisions.
And the regulators are all trying to get us to be in management now, and we just say, no, we're not doing that. And that frustrates them, but what are they going to do, shoot us? They can't shoot us all.
Yeah, right.
So we just say, we're not doing it, and they get upset, but we say, no, that's management. In the first place, I don't have the ability to make the decision.
No.
And it would be the wrong, anyway.
Be the wrong thing to do.
Yeah, it would be.
Yeah. So how do you give or get exposure to people who may be the ultimate successor to Jamie? You said you have your dinners and you travel around, but do they make presentations? I mean, how do you really be able to gauge them?
Presentations don't do much
Aha.
for me. I like to go sit down with them. I like to go sit down with them and spend time with them and talk to the people who work for them and see how. I'm pretty much a performance guy. I don't care how pretty you are. I don't care. Either perform or you don't perform. Right. And so if you perform, that's a first indication you probably are pretty good. Then you go talk to the people to see how they're treated. Because you can get short-term performance by beating the hell out of everybody, but that isn't going to work long-term. So it's a process. And you know what? It takes hard work. It just is. It's like anything else you take on in your life. You go at it or don't quit. But it's basic stuff.
Yeah, that's great. So on the issue of a horse race, Disney had their horse race. You mentioned that there might be several candidates for Jamie. How do you handle that? Or do they know they're in a horse race? What?
Oh, they know they're pretty good.
They know they're good.
They know they're pretty good. They know the directors talk to them, but we didn't do like Jack Welch did. He had a real horse race, and he told them it was a horse race. And I was on the Home Depot board after the horse race was over, and we hired Nardelli. I was not on the board when we hired Nardelli. I came on right after we got hired Nardelli. And I told Jack, I said, Jack, you gave him $100 million worth of options, and we had to buy those options. He said, it didn't cost me anything. But that's Jack, and it's true, it didn't cost him anything. And when we fired Nardelli, which took me 6 months, because he's a nutball, but anyway, well, he was ruining the company, he was destroying the company, destroying it. Because he can make turbines.
He was an outside guy, outside director.
He came from GE. Yeah, he came from GE. Our
GE.
lead director was a GE director, and he thought this guy was great. He was great at making turbines, but he couldn't run stores.
Right.
And that's okay. But so when he left, he had $74 million in deferred comp that he had, and then he had this $100 million thing. So $174 million, and we looked like a bunch of fools. And by the way, we were. We were fools. And but anyway, we weren't as bad as not getting rid of him.
Right, exactly.
Woo!
Exactly.
What a disaster. I mean, I'd have paid $1 billion to get rid of it.
Well, that is the
When they're bad, boy, get rid of them quick. They don't get any better, and problems do not age well.
Right. But that's true, though. You end up paying a lot more for an outside CEO to come in than somebody that you promote from within, which is outrageous. And then, of course, you pay a lot more
When they leave.
When they leave.
And then you look like a nut.
Yeah. Yes, it's just
Because you are.
Yeah, we ended up having to do that when we brought in a new CEO for Tempur. We paid a lot.
Yes, you did.
Yes, we did.
Bobby was not happy.
No, he was not happy, but he didn't pay for it either.
No, he didn't.
So we ended up similar to Nardelli, the $100 million in stock options when you're coming in as a new CEO into an activist situation, because they really don't want to take on that role as an activist, but with an activist involved. Let's talk about a little bit of leadership in crisis. And people have asked, well, we've already got a question about the London Whale, so you don't have to describe it. But I guess the big lesson and the big news is, how did you handle the crisis for the London Whale? Was it the full board, or was it a subset of the board, or an individual?
This is another genius of Jamie Dimon. So this thing hit, and the irony of all that, the way our audit works, we do audits over a year. We try to audit, depending on the risk. Highest risk, a year. Next risk, 2 years. And next risk, 4 years. Had we had that audit 6 months earlier, you'd have never heard of it. We found it. We just didn't find it. We found it in March, and it was over.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, so Jamie made the comment on CNBC, this is a tempest in a teapot. Well, that was probably not a good thing to do. But anyway, that's Jamie. It turned out not to be a tempest in a teapot. It was a mess.
It's bigger than that.
Ooh, $6.5 billion.
Yeah.
So that was in April. In May, we had our annual meeting in Tampa. And he gets up and he says, guys, I can't run the business and do this investigation. I don't have time. So you all will have to take over the investigation. So the lead director took the head of governance and head of the audit committee, and the three of us did this investigation, which lasted 8 months. We hired our own lawyers. The company hired outside lawyers. We had lawyers that had lawyers. And we did our own investigation. They did their investigation. Now, when it came time to write, we wrote our deal up, 22 pages. The company wrote theirs up, it was 105 pages or whatever it was. The fascinating thing about that investigation, and that guy's no longer with the company. The guy that ran the investigation, and he's a wonderful person, wonderful human being, just not tough enough, but he would not say in the report, the buck stops for the CEO. He had to rewrite it 28 times. And the lead director keeps saying, until you put that in there, because we put it in ours. I mean, hell, it was Jamie's. And Jamie Dimon has a flaw. And I'll tell you what it is in a minute. And it's okay. We all have them. Everybody has them. And I'll tell you, as a director, you better figure out what the flaw is pretty quickly. And you better go tell the CEO, this is your flaw. It's okay. Everybody's got them. but we're going to help you with this. We learned, we did it after the fact, which was why we had the London whale. So we finally got him to admit that Jamie Dimon was the CEO while this happened, and he was one of the causes of the problem. Now Jamie's flaw, it's not a terrible flaw, but it's a flaw. You would think as tough as he is, as tough as he sounds, that he would fire people at will.
Yeah.
He can't do it. Right. Hates it. Hates to fire people. And in the process, and we went down and told him afterwards, we said, we're going to help you with this, and he said, thank you. We fired, our committee fired 5 people, all head of risk, the head of the CIO, or the Chief Investment Office, and the 3 people that caused this. We cut the CFO salary in half. He's no longer with the company. And we cut Jamie's salary in half. And he is with the company, thank goodness. The Fed called us down, the 3 of us, with all smiles on their faces, said this is the best report, blah, blah, blah. Well, we still made record profits that year. And I told, and then the regulators fined us $1 billion. I said, we didn't cost you guys a penny. Anyway, this was when they were doing all that. And so they fined us $1 billion. We still had record profits. I called Jamie. I said, now the liberals are going to hate you. He said, well, they'll have to get over themselves because we had record profits. And we did. And it was quite an ordeal. It was we interviewed, one of us or all of us went to every interview of 27 people. And if any of you all sat in those meetings, you'd have been sick at your stomach. It was awful, what some of these people did. And I don't have email, as I told you last night. I don't have email. I have a flip phone. And the reason is...
So when they subpoena your email, you really don't have anything to give, do you?
No, I don't have a file. I don't have anything. They call me every day. When I leave here, I'll get a call. We've been sued on this, and you have to keep all your records. I called them up and said, I have no records. And they said, well, you're a dream client. I don't get subpoenaed because there's nothing to talk about.
Right.
Seriously. And the reason I do that is I have been in so many investigations as chairman of the audit committee and read so many stupid damn emails and listened to so many of these, the traders talk to you. Can't. There are things said in emails that I would not go out in the forest by myself and say out loud. And people say it and they think they're so clever.
They do.
Woo.
I'm the same as you, though. I don't keep any of that.
Nothing.
All the board materials I get,
I never walk out of anything with a piece of paper, nothing.
Yeah, I don't either.
Doesn't work.
It doesn't work. I agree with you. Let's turn the topic over to how do you help the short term, how do you help the second CEO continue to survive beyond, like you said with Nardelli, he only stayed, 6 months, did you say?
No. He stayed 5 years.
He stayed 5 years.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah.
You guys kept him a long time.
Well, it took me, this is a great story. It took me 6 months to, you guys know Greg Brenneman? He lives here in Houston. Anyway, he was on the board. And Greg and I figured out this guy was, because I went to the stores. I went to 50 stores a year and the people were just destroyed. And the lead director had been on the Home Depot, and he's Ken Langone. I don't know if any of you all know Ken Langone, but he's a beauty. And he loved Nardelli, and I'd go up I live in Florida in the wintertime, and I'd drive up to see him. I said, Kenny, this isn't working. This is killing these people. So finally, he asked me to give a speech to the board. I gave a speech, told him what I thought, and it was pretty brutal. I was pretty ugly.
Was this an executive session?
Uh-huh.
So, okay.
And I said, so when I got through, they said, well, what would you do today? I said, you really want to know what I did? And they said, yeah. And I said, well, I would get up, I would get a guard, I would go in his office, I would get his desk drawer, I would hand it to him, and I'd get his ass right out of here. If you really want to know. They said, okay, well, that's clear. So they kept, the old guard kept backing him because they'd hired him. And then Nardelli did a dumb thing. He badmouthed Ken Langone in the press. And Langone called me up and said, we got to get rid of him. I said, yeah, I think we do. life is an amazing thing. But anyway.
So how did you get the second CEO coming in to
The second
be successful?
CEO was there.
Ah, okay.
Nardelli had hired him, Frank Blake. Frank Blake was the anti-Nardelli. He had his ego totally under control. He was a grown-up. He was not a bomb thrower. He was quiet and nice, and you would have never picked him out of a crowd. Yeah. But we all liked him, and so we said, okay, let's, because I don't like bringing in outside people. I really don't. I mean, you've done a terrible, the CEO's done a terrible job if you got to go outside to find somebody. That's pretty bad. So he took over. The stock was 39, went to 19, and when he retired, it was 131.
Wow.
So,
very successful.
And it never changed. He was just Frank Blake every day. He just went to the stores. He did his job. And the people, you go in a Home Depot store and ask, well, how about Frank Blake? They will say he's the best person. He was just a wonderful person. Nardelli, the first day he went to a store, I wasn't there then. They'd hired him. He went to a store. He said, okay, you all can ask any question you want. Let's just really get into this thing. Somebody asked a question. He said, that's the dumbest damn question I've ever heard. Well, that kind of ended the questions.
Yes.
You know.
Nobody would ask after that.
It's just,
right.
It was a terrible thing.
So Frank was successful. Is there anything that you did as a board to make sure that the transition that Fred did from whatever role he was in to the CEO made him successful, or did he just do that on his own?
No, he did it on his own.
Wow.
I wouldn't take any credit for that. It's just like I wouldn't take any credit for Jamie. Look, these people, I had a very smart guy tell me one time, and he was very successful. He started Jif Peanut Butter, he started Humana. He did some things. He said, Labe, I was 25, I just started my first business. And he said, Labe, now you're going to hire a lot of people in your life. And in the first 3 months, you're going to know the answer. 3 months, it only takes 3 months. He said, but your heart won't let you do what your head tells you.
That's true.
And he said, you got to get over that. Well, trust me, I'm over it. I don't, 3 months, boom, it's over. I think that's a problem we have in this country. We hope. We just tried hope and whatever the other word is.
Hope is not a plan. Right?
Hope is not a plan. We just tried it for 8 years. It didn't work so well. So I think
he's talking about politics now.
No, not me. I'd never get into that. But hope is great, but not for business.
Yeah. Right.
Just they're either doing it or they're not doing it. If they're not doing it, just, and by the way, the interesting thing is they know they're not doing it. They know it. And the tragedy is the people working for them know they're not doing it. And they're looking at you and saying, what are you doing? I thought you had some sense. What is going on here? Everybody knows, and you know, but your heart won't let you. Just forget your heart. Get on with the thing.
Yeah, I agree.
You're just killing the morale. It's awful.
Now, you've been involved with non-for-profits.
My own.
Yeah, and your own
Yeah.
non-for-profits.
I've had
So
a few
I think
of
the
those.
question then becomes for non-for-profits, if you've got an outstanding CEO or an executive director, very charismatic, how do you bring in that second individual when that first one retires so that they are successful? Any thoughts on that? No.
I have no idea how to do that. Charismatic. I'm more of a performance guy. I don't really.
Well, charismatic in that they have a great relationship with the donors. They have a great
So they're
relationship.
performing.
They're performing. They have great relationships with the
well, if
donors.
they're
They have the relationship with the donors, and so therefore.
I don't know how to do that.
I've
been on a college board, and we had to fire a CEO, fire the president. I've been on a cancer board. We had to fire two of them. I don't worry so much about following a charismatic. Either the person comes in, does the job, or they don't. I don't know. You complicate things if you're worried about the previous one. You're only looking at the one you've just hired. If they don't work, they don't work. It's okay.
Right.
I mean, nobody's going to die. You just move on.
I would agree with that, except for the fact that, especially in non-for-profits, you're raising money, right? And if you have a outstanding director, outstanding CEO, who's been responsible for raising most of those funds, and a second one comes in
And doesn't.
and
doesn't
can't do it,
perform.
and can't do it.
Then they go.
Then they go. But you've got a non-for-profit that continues to decline in terms
Well,
of
then you
its
should,
revenue.
okay. But I think then you need an endowment.
Yes, right.
So, I mean, you got to have capital in
gotta-
whatever you're doing, because things aren't just like this all the time.
Right.
So you got to have capital. And so, I mean, the cancer thing that we were on, we raised an endowment, so you can make a mistake. If you don't have any capital, you can't make mistakes.
can't,
Well, that's
yeah.
crazy.
So for those of you who asked the question about how do you help that second CEO succeed, I think a lot of it has to do with, one, having the capital, make sure you've got it. And then second of all, there is a transition plan that you can work with to make sure that they're introduced to the donors, and if it's a family business, that they're introduced to the important stakeholders. It doesn't guarantee success. I've done that with a couple of my non-for-profits, but I'll tell you, it's better than just throwing them out there and telling them, okay, go to it and perform.
Yeah,
I think
but-
that's the tougher part. Right?
I agree.
Okay. So let's talk about new CEOs, the upcoming generation. Given shareholder activism, given the competition that's out there, what would you define are the skill sets of a up-and-coming CEO that you're looking at?
Well, all the people that I'm looking across J.P. Morgan are different. Every one of them are different. They're not all the same. It's not a cookie cutter. They all have strengths and they all have weaknesses, just like Jamie, just like me, just like you. We all have strengths and weaknesses. What you got to figure out are will the strengths, or you got to try to figure it out. You can't figure it out until a CEO is not a CEO until they're a CEO. It's just not. I mean, you can't figure it out in advance. But what you want to make sure is the strengths weigh the weaknesses, and you want to find people that will listen. Now, I have seen examples of people who will listen until they become CEOs, and then they stop listening. So then that gets ugly. But you have to do the best you can to see if you got somebody that will listen and wants to perform. And some people want to be CEOs to be CEOs. I'm a CEO, remember, but some people want to really perform. Hard to figure out. It's really hard to figure out until they're. I remember in our meeting in Chicago, somebody said, "Well, he's never been a CEO." I said, "Hell, nobody's been a CEO until they're a CEO." You just you know. But you got to be prepared to move if it didn't work.
Right.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
I'd love to open it up for questions, and we've been getting some cards, and I've been asking the questions, but I'd love to open it up for questions.
This is an interesting one. Why don't you get him off the stage?
I decided not to ask
Signed his
that
mother.
question. Here's another question. The first CEO of a startup is particularly hard to replace, and I know you've done a lot of startups.
Ooh.
So what role should the CEO play in finding that replacement?
The startup.
Startup.
Well, I've done 26 of them.
Yeah.
And so I've seen a lot of failures. And I'm old. And I've made so many mistakes in hiring the people. And God, I've made a lot of mistakes. I now have 5 left, and I have 5 wonderful CEOs, I think. They're all performing. Well, one of them's not performing. One of them's losing money, but he's in Silicon Valley. He's supposed to be losing money, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, that's how it works.
I don't know how that works. But anyway, that's what I told him. I said,
And have high valuation as a part of that.
Exactly. I said, you're just killing it out there because you're losing your butt every day. So anyway, and the people keep giving them money. It's unbelievable. It's not a Kentucky thing. But anyway, the CEOs I've hired, the ones I've made mistakes on, and I always waited too long. My heart always got in the way. Generally, were great salespeople. And I'm a salesman, basically. You can tell that. So, I would be sold by a salesman. And I don't do that anymore. Salesmen are generally good salesmen. That's all they really are. And that's not a bad thing. You got to have them. Nothing happens till somebody sells something. So I've made mistakes by hiring salesmen to be CEOs. I've made mistakes by hiring salesmen to be sales managers. That doesn't work sometimes either.
Individual performers, right? To be
Exactly.
managers, right? It doesn't work.
A CEO has to have, gosh, they got to have incredible passion. They got to have incredible integrity. I mean, I shouldn't use incredible. They got to have integrity. And they got to be smart as hell. Believe it or not, they can fool you on some of those things until they get in there. And the other thing is taking over a startup. A startup is an ugly beast in itself because everything that can possibly go wrong goes wrong. That's right. And I mean, my favorite bumper sticker, Murphy was an optimist. That's my favorite bumper sticker because everything that can possibly go wrong will go wrong for that CEO. So you've got to stay right close to them because they're fragile too. They don't know. They don't know. So, and it's just like your nonprofit people. If you bring them in, you got to stay close to them because you got to figure out whether they can really do it or not. And they deserve that. I've got a lot of experience now, but you know how you get experience. They deserve, if you're going to bring them in and take a risk with them, they're taking a risk too, and but if it doesn't work, you got to go.
So is the CEO in your startups help to find their successor, or do you leave them out of that process?
I've never had a business long enough to have a successor in one of my businesses, and the reason is I'm never going to go public. I hate bureaucracy. So they get to a certain size, I just sell them. And maybe somebody else is going to make a lot of money after. That's fabulous. I'm all for them. But I got no interest. So I have very few people working. So I've never had that. I've never done that.
Yeah.
I've had my own. I've got a guy that's been with me 34 years and runs all my business. So I guess he's my successor, and he's been fabulous. But I don't like bureaucracy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have seen it where the CEO will be involved in helping to find their replacement, but that really depends on the maturity of the CEO, right? And whether that CEO is, the passive aggressive behavior where they pretend that they're helping you to find somebody good, but at the end they pull the plug. Or in one case that I've had where the CEO will tell us, oh, I'm retiring in 2 years, so I'll help you find, but they keep extending their time frame from which to retire. So at some point in time, I think the board really has to end up taking over and saying, no, we're going to find that next replacement.
Yep.
And some CEOs, frankly, want to find another version of themselves rather than what the company really needs for the future, which I think is the most important role that we have as board members, is making sure we bring in somebody who's really going to be for the future of the company. Your thoughts on the outgoing CEO staying on the board?
Terrible idea.
Terrible idea.
Terrible. Don't let that happen. Don't let that happen. That's terrible.
Why do you say that?
Because the poor guy that's the CEO sitting there, and this guy, he's been CEO, he's probably been successful, that's why he's staying on there, and he thinks he's being second guessed all. Get him the hell off. Let him go retire and hit balls. Go be on a board, do something else. But
even founders
got
even worse.
Hell, I'm a founder. I get off boards. Okay. That's terrible to do to people. Terrible. Yeah. Don't let that happen. Just don't let it happen. Just say, no, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
You're direct. You got to understand you're the directors. You've been hired to do these jobs. Sometimes you got to say no. It's okay to say no.
Yeah, right.
They can fire you too. I wish they'd fire me at J.P. Morgan, but they keep hiring me.
They keep keeping you on there.
They keep hiring me.
You're the only one willing to travel like that. That's why.
Well, that's
so, a question again on the regulatory side. How do you know if problems are caused by regulatory declarations, Dodd-Frank, for example, or by poor or good management when you're walking around?
Well, there would not be a Dodd-Frank had the banks all been managed properly. Now, Dodd-Frank overdid it, as they'd always. The thing always swings this way. I remember speaking at the University of Kentucky to a business school class, and this was about 4 years ago, and this little girl gets up, cute little thing. She was graduating, Am I allowed to say cute little thing? Anyway, I don't know. Anyway, she was cute. I mean, I don't know why that's so bad, but anyway, she got up and she said to me, Mr. Jackson, I'm graduating this year from business school. If you knowing what you know, what would you do? I said, I would buy a pair of tassel loafers and I would go to Washington and I would get a job as a lobbyist because it's going to take 10 years to unwind Dodd-Frank to where we get it down where people can operate again. And that's what I believe. I mean, our lobbyists work all day long. We've won one thing out of all the things, this derivative, you wouldn't, anyway, it's a very complicated thing, but we won it and it was a good thing. But there wouldn't be a Dodd-Frank had the boards done their job. No, boards.
The boards.
They should have fired some of these CEOs in these banks. They should have fired them, and they didn't.
Well, we were talking about this last night, the Lehman board. How many people were on there that had any financial background?
The Lehman board had Dina Merrill, nice lady, pretty as she can be. She was 83 years old. Had a producer
Hollywood producer, huh?
A Broadway producer who was 84 years old. They had Dr. Doom, who is the economist, who knows nothing about running anything. And they doubled down, and I mean, it's just unbelievable. You go and you read these stories. Bear Stearns, I mean, we took them over in 72 hours. And now you go back and read what was going on in that thing in WAMU. I remember Jamie said to us, we'd like to buy WAMU. And to the board, and he said, I'd like to offer $42 or whatever it was. And I knew the guy that ran WAMU. And I said to Jamie, and afterwards he said, we'll have to put him on the board. I went to Jamie, I said, that would be a disaster because the guy's never in doubt about anything. So we didn't do it because the guy wouldn't call Jamie back. Wouldn't even call him back. So he goes broke. And I called Jamie, I said, see, you ought to start calling these guys. They go broke, you buy them for nothing. You get them for nothing. But the guy was an arrogant fool, and that's what happened to him. And that board should have fired him. But no, they didn't. No, it's just tragic. It's tragic what boards don't do. It's tragic because there wouldn't have been a Dodd-Frank if the boards had done their jobs.
Yeah, that's a good point. One more question. To what extent could or should the chief human resource officer get involved with the board on CEO succession?
I don't think you need the chief human resource. Nah, you don't need them at all. I mean, I've known some that are good, but they don't. No.
Tell me how you really feel.
No, and I like ours. He's fabulous, but I don't think he has the ability to figure out whether there's a woman and two men and whether these people can run this company. I just don't think he can do that. I don't think that's his expertise.
Well, and for something as complex as JP Morgan, I don't know that the head of HR understands the full complexity.
No, he understands it.
The way a board would, though.
Well, no, he wouldn't, and he's been an HR person all his life.
Yeah.
He's never run businesses. We don't have any financial people on the Bank One, on the JP Morgan board, and they raise hell with us. We don't have any financial people. I said, I got 270,000 of them out there working. I don't need any financial people on the board. We don't have a technology person, which we probably need, but and we'll get to one. But we're sure on that. We only got 10 directors. We'd love to get 7, but we got too damn many committees, so we got to keep 10. But
yeah, and you as often as you meet, you probably need that many. You know, what can go right or can go wrong? There is a handout in your packet. It was Heydrich and Stanford put it together, and it's this wonderful brochure, but it shows the types of CEO behaviors that may affect the ability for you to bring in a successor. It's a wonderful piece for you to take away in terms of understanding and looking at the CEOs that you do have and whether they're open or not open to proper succession planning as we have it. And I don't know, Barbara, are we out of time? I wasn't sure
Got
on the
4
time.
minutes.
We got 4 minutes.
But
So-
who's keeping track?
I don't know. My watch is still 2 hours behind. So, Labe, any last minute thoughts around CEO succession and what you think about the next generation of CEOs?
Well, I guess someday a millennial will be a CEO. And these millennials are a piece of work. I think they're called millennials, but they're wonderful. They're smart, they're wonderful, but they are different. We had one, in one company I got in, and the CEO called me up and he said, I just had a 28-year-old walk in and she said, I got to go see my sister. He said, okay, well, where is she? He said, well, this is in Louisville. She said, she's in Miami. He said, well, is she okay? Oh, she's fine. Yeah, I think I ought to go see her. Is she sick or? No, I just think I ought to go see her. So she goes out, gets on a plane, goes to Miami, comes back Monday morning. And he says, what was that about? She said, what do you mean what was it about? He said, I just thought I ought to go see my sister. That's the way they think. So one of these days, one of these millennials will be a CEO, and that'll be something. I'll be fascinated to see that. But look, your directors, your responsibility, your biggest responsibility is the next CEO. And is the CEO you got doing the job, is he or she performing as they should? And if they're not, then move on.
Yeah.
You're not doing any, and everybody knows, and everybody says the board's a bunch of fools. So get on with it.
Right?
That'd be my recommendation.
Yeah. Don't let your heart control your decision making.
Only with your wife.
Okay, your wife.
Or your husband.
Or your husband.
I'm sorry, I keep forgetting there are women involved now. I'm kidding.
So, in my perspective, I would have to agree with them. In working a lot with succession planning, I really believe involving the entire board, involving your CEO if he's got the right, he or she has the right temperament for making it happen, and you can make that decision. And then, like you said, cutting your losses when you can.
Move on.
So thank you so much for being with us today. We really enjoyed it. Thank you for the questions.
Thank you, sweetie.
Thank you.
Good day.